So welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Namaste, assalamu alaikum. Good evening, good night, or good morning to all of you. And we are so pleased to have so many of you from all over the world in different time zones joining us. I am Shakira Mohammed from Trinidad and Tobago, a teacher for the past 15 years. And ladies and gentlemen, this is our 209th edition of our ICC Thought Leaders Forum. And we wish to sincerely thank all of you who have contributed in whatever way to the success of this ongoing Pan-Indo-Caribbean and Pan-Indian Diaspora Global Project. For 208 unbroken continuous weeks, we have been here every single Sunday. And in the past 4 years and 1 week, we have featured 878 presenters from all parts of the world, speaking on 208 topics. So ladies and gentlemen, this is a weekly forum being hosted by the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center, a legally registered research and publishing company operating since 2010. And in order to continue this weekly program and to make it bigger and better, we are kindly asking for your suggestions, as well as becoming volunteers and donate. And you all can contact Dr. Kumar Mahabir for further details. So I'll now introduce you to our moderator for this afternoon, who is Shalama Mohammed, the co-director of this ICC Zoom platform, who is a business teacher and researcher from Trinidad and Tobago, and she obtained her master's degree in business psychology from Franklin University in the USA. So Shalma, welcome.
Thanks so much, Shakir. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Namaste, and a warm welcome to you all. Thanks for choosing to be here with us. This program is being recorded on Zoom, and hopefully we'll get the live stream up in a few minutes on the YouTube channel of the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center. To avoid intrusions from trolls, Daryl Bransom, our IT manager, has muted everyone. Speakers, please do not admit anyone, do not unmute anyone, and do not allow anyone to share your screen, please. Thanks for your cooperation. Our program today is entitled A Proposal for the United Nations to Recognize an Annual Day in Memory of Indian Indentured Servitude and its Abolition. And I just want to relate a little bit of history here for you. The ethnic cleansing began on the night of the 24th May with the burning of John Muhammad's store. But the worst of it was seen on the 25th of May with murders. The siege on the Indians lasted 38 hours, with hundreds beaten, dozens of women gang raped, and 222 homes and businesses burned to the ground, with Indians forced to flee to the Wisma police station to safety. 744 Indian families became destitute. 3,399 Indians were evacuated, effectively rendering Wisma and Christiansburg, British Guyana, free of its Indian population on May 26, 1964. 2 years later, on May 26, 1966, the Forbes-Burnham government declared the date Independence Day, a bittersweet event for Indo-Guyanese who remember. According to the government of India, non-resident Indians, NRIs, are citizens of India who currently are not living in India, while the term people of Indian origin, PIO, refers to people of Indian birth or ancestry, like us, who are citizens of countries other than India. There are over 29 million NRIs and PIOs comprising the world's largest diaspora, a diaspora which started with the indentureship of Indian servants from 1927 to 1917. The experience at Wisma in Guyana was a direct result of the system of indentureship. So was the Hussein massacre in Trinidad in 1884, and the Ugandan expulsion of 1972, and the displacement of Indo-Fijian farmers since 1999, and the continuous spates of violence against Indo-South Africans. We have one of the Ugandans here who was expelled. We have persons here who knew and who were there during the Wisma event. We have people here who experienced the violence in South Africa, as well as in Fiji. This is not an exhaustive list. Should the PIO experiences of racism, loss of life, limb, and livelihoods, wherever they are domiciled, continue to go unrecognized? At this point, I just want to bring a song which was written by George Rampersad, a Trinidadian now living in Denmark, on the occasion of Indian Arrival Day. And we are bringing this at this point in time because it's you some of the history regarding Indian Arrival Day and the experiences of those persons. Daryl, would you mind bringing that video for us, please?
In Trinidad, May 30th, 1845, 227 laborers arrived on the fatal Razak after a long journey across dark waters known as Kalapani. Quarantine on Nelson Island, work on the plantation, speaking Bhojpuri, known as Bangkuli, plowing and planting, cutting and weeding in fields of sugarcane, working in the sun and rain. Now I would like to say on Indian Arrival Day, thank you and respect to those who showed the way. Sugar was king, but the estates wouldn't pay more than 20 to 45 cents a day. From Uttar Pradesh, Bengal and Bihar, they lived in chopari made from tapia and gobar. With just a sil and lorha, chauki and a pilna, tawa and a chimta, lota and tharia, cooking on a chulha, bhaji bhat and dal, sitting on a pirha and sleeping on a pal. The hours were long, the work very hard. In poverty they struggled here in Trinidad. Indentured labor in the colony was almost like another form of slavery. People only had their music and religion, playing a drum and singing a song. With a dholak and a dhantal, a tasa and a jhal, keeping their traditions on certain occasions. Kartik and Ramlila, Sopari, Mayan, Pagwa, Usse and Diwali, Eid and Shivaratri. We have come a long way and we are so glad and grateful and thankful to you, Trinidad. Little by little, penny by penny, people scraped and saved to rise above poverty and to provide the coming generation with the opportunity to get an education. Now after many years, things are looking bright. Our nation now is moving onto a higher height. Our living standard and life expectancy is on par with many a developed country. Trinidad and Tobago, have a happy holiday. Be conscious and aware as you go along your way. Remember the ancestors on this auspicious day. Good luck to one and all on this 30th of May. As we celebrate this joyous occasion, may Vishnu, Allah, God and Jah bless our nation. Let us join hands together, let us pray for security and unity on Indian Arrival Day.
Thank you so much, Daryl, and thank you to George and his production team for that well-researched item. And I just want to share with you that although he is singing for our commemoration, 30th of May, it really is significant to all the other countries who've celebrated Indian Arrival Day. And our question today is really, to what extent should there be global awareness of the aggression of Indian indentureship and the cruelty faced by PIOs despite their resilience and success? Ladies and gentlemen, over the next 2 hours, we'll be hearing from a distinguished panel of speakers. And we begin with none other than Ashok Ramsaran, who lives in the USA but was born in Guyana. He's the president of the Indian Diaspora Council. He's a board member of the New York Presbyterian Hospital and Center for Caribbean and Latin American Studies at St. John's University. Welcome, Ashok. You can go ahead with your presentation.
Thanks to ICC, Dr. Kumar, Shalima, and Shakira for this ongoing 209th session. Outstanding programs to relevant topics. It takes a lot of hard work, planning, and bringing people together. So thanks for inviting me to this session. Before I begin, briefly, I'd like to say Happy Memorial Day to those in the USA. That's being celebrated tomorrow. And as Shalima pointed out, this is 60th anniversary of Wismar massacre. And it's ironic that May 26th is the anniversary of Wismar as well as the independence of Guyana. Quite ironic. Indian Arrival Day is also being celebrated in St. Vincent, Reunion Island, Suriname, Trinidad and Tobago in the next few days. I want to say hello to Mr. Murdul Patak, Mr. Pitambar Prasad, lots of friends and associates. Let's begin. Slide number 2. I'd like to focus on the following. For this proposal for UNESCO to designate an annual day for Indian indentureship and its abolition, I'd like to talk about the objective of what is to be achieved, the rationale behind it, and UNESCO designation of notable dates already in place and precedent. And then a brief discussion of Indian indentureship history, the countries impacted, the dates of arrival, and its abolition, as well as observances, Indian arrival days, and monuments which have been erected. I also want to talk about education and research and the media of people, descendants of indentureship, which shows how significant an impact they have made and the contributions they have. And finally, the proposal. What is the petition to UNESCO? And the conclusion. So let's go to the next slide. The objective is as follows. To petition the UNESCO, which actually stands for United Nations Education, Scientific and Cultural Organization, to designate an annual day for Indian indentureship and its abolition. And the mandate of UNESCO is, as stated there, a specialized agency of the United Nations with the aim of promoting world peace, security through international cooperation, education, arts, and sciences. These are the international commemorations observed by UNESCO. The United Nations designates specific days, weeks, years, and decades as occasions to mark particular events or topics in order to promote, through awareness and action, the objectives of the organization itself. Usually it's a member state that propose these observances, but we are taking it as an international organizations that's going to do so. Next slide. World heritage is our legacy from the past, as Shalima briefly mentioned. What we live with today and what we pass on to future generations. Our culture and natural heritage are both irreplaceable sources of life and inspiration. It's what makes us who we are. what makes the concept of World Heritage exceptional is its universal application. World Heritage sites belong to all the peoples of the world, irrespective of the territory on which they are located. That is to say, in a particular country, you could have a World Heritage site belong to one group of people, but it's respected and observed by all others in that particular country. UNESCO seeks to encourage the identification, protection, and preservation of cultural and natural heritage around the world, which are considered to be outstanding value to humanity. That is the, the mandate under which this discussion is being held here today, and why we have the courage to make this application. This is emboldened in an international treaty called the Convention Concerning the Protection of World Cultural and Natural Heritage, adopted in 1972 by UNESCO. Next slide, please. So we are asking for an international day, an annual day to be observed by all our peoples globally. Each international day offers many actors the opportunity to organize activities related to the theme of the day. That is, should we be successful, this day will be observed and commemorated by many people around the world, because over 12 million people are descendants of Indian indentureship living in those destination colonies, as well as their second journeys to Europe, North America, and Australia. Organizations and the offices of the United Nations system, and most importantly, governments, civil society, and the public and private sectors, schools, universities, and generally citizens, make International Day a springboard for awareness-raising action. In other words, it highlights the history of this Indian indentureship and its abolition. These are international commemorations observed by UNESCO. The United Nations designated these dates to mark particular events, which I previously stated. Next slide. So we're asking for something, but we're asking based on precedent. And UNESCO has recognized some portions of this already, or specific portions. The Apravasi Ghat, which is in Mauritius, has been designated a UNESCO historic site. And it states from 1834, when the first Indian arrivals were there, or arrived there. So it's already designated. The second one is the International Indentured Labor Route Project, which has been spearheaded by people like Professor Maurice Hassan Khan and members of different countries such as St. Vincent, Dr. Arnold Thomas, who are part of that. So UNESCO has already recognized two portions of the indentureship. One is a Pravasi Ghat in Mauritius, and the next one is the Indentured Labor Project, which is ongoing. Next slide, please. So what is precedence? Precedence is when United Nations, UNESCO, has already acknowledged similar incidents, similar segments of history, and accredited it with this International Day of Remembrance, such as the Day of Slave Trade and its abolition, which is being commemorated on the 23rd of August each year. It was first celebrated in a number of countries, particularly in Haiti in 1998, Senegal in 1999, etc. So we have here something significant in history, which is slavery, and the UNESCO designated a date for it, observance, 23rd of August. Next slide. So what we're asking for is how to designate a day for Indian internship and its abolition. And as all of you know, or most of you should know, it's by being repeated over and over, it was a system of indentured servitude where more than 1.6 million workers from British India were transported to labor in European colonies, similar as a substitute for slave labor, which was abolished in 1833, the French colonies in 1848, etc. So you have this mass of people called indentured laborers were taken from India to all these different colonies as commodities for profit. The French started in 1828, ended in 1933. The British in 1834, ended in 1917. The descendants, as I previously stated, amount to 10 to 12 million people residing in the destination countries as well as second journey countries. Next slide, please. This is a rough map with some dots, green designating India and red dots designating where laborers were taken. Not shown are French territories, Reunion Island, Martinique, Guadeloupe, French Guyana, Belize, Malaysia, and East Africa. By the way, Malaysia has the second largest people of Indian origin, 3.3 million, and they were taken from mostly South India under a different kind of program of indentureship. And of course, East Africa, where many people were taken to do work on the railroad. Next slide, please. We're looking at a chart which I developed a few years ago, which describes the country and the date of arrival, the ship, and the number of arrivals. And you will see there, it's quite astounding to look at it in one page. A lot of memories, a lot of people, a lot of activity. Next page. So, Indian Arrival Day observances and monuments. We are observing it already. The people who are descendants of indentured laborers are observing it in former colonies in the Caribbean, Africa, and Oceania, Australia, and thereabouts. Colonial powers are, we observe Indian Arrival Day in the UK, in France, and Netherlands, and second journeys destinations such as USA, Canada, and Australia. The people who have made the second journey from those colonies are doing their observances as well. We've also dedicated monuments to Indian indentureship, which includes Calcutta Memorial in India, Apavasi Ghat in Mauritius, Guyana at Highbury and Monument Gardens, Suriname, the Maibop, Trinidad and Tobago at Waterloo and St. Park, Reunion Island, Martinique, Guadeloupe, and South Africa. Next slide, please. So while we are observing these things, we are also studying them, researching them, and discussing them, and writing about them. There are diaspora departments and universities globally. In India, major universities, in the former colonies in the Caribbean, Africa, and Oceania. All these universities have different departments and research studies, and as well as UK, France, Netherlands, USA, Canada, and Australia. Writing, education, books and writing, newspapers, magazines, radio, television, online films and productions. You can see the gamut of observances we are doing already. Next page. So what is this proposal? The proposal is to establish a global team with leadership to file the application and follow through. To assign a name for the team, which would be global in nature, develop an approximate designated logo, design logo, assign a team representative in Paris, where UNESCO is headquartered, so that we can have person-to-person meetings when necessary. By the way, Indian Diaspora Council has a representative in Paris already. Next is to select a suitable date. And a lot of dates have been discussed, whether it's May or June. And if you look at the chart, which I previously posted, in May, 6 of the 14 arrival dates are listed, and in June, 4 of the 14. We need to have letters of support from international agencies, organizations, and countries to file with the application, and set a target date and funding schemes, and issue press releases and updates, and regular updates to the Indian diaspora community on developments, which will give them an insight on what we are planning to do. Indian Diaspora Council, of which I'm the head, can take this lead, but it has to be so decided by the international group so that we can take, and we urge others to join as well. Next slide, please. In conclusion, it's a noble objective with merit and justification. So the application should be forthright. It's a historical remembrance for posterity, and if we don't do it, who would? It's a long overlooked recognition of history of Indian indentureship and its abolition and its time, and the need for a dedicated global team, planning and diligence, all voluntary, and costs to be incurred if necessary, when necessary. Funding to be determined by the planning team, and that's my presentation. I just want to add one more thing, is that in line of this, we can also apply for UNESCO recognition and designation of Calcutta Memorial as a heritage site. And we should, as this is the 209th session of this ICC session, we should ask for an international Girmitia song. Thank you very much.
All right, good suggestions there, Ashok. Thank you so much, and thank you for all the information and for establishing a path forward. My apologies. We're hearing some chutney music outside my house right now. So, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much, Ashok, and I thank the IDC for supporting today's program. I want to bring on now our second speaker, and this is Professor Chan Chooney from the Netherlands. Currently in the Netherlands, he was born in Suriname. He obtained his PhD in social sciences at the University of Utrecht in the Netherlands and has published extensively on Hindustani history, integration policy, and racial discrimination. Welcome, Professor Chooney.
Can I unmute now?
Yes.
Okay. Greetings to all. I partly agree with this proposal because the framing, the framing that you use the word abolition in this context implies that indentured labor was to court a bad thing, but it has two sides. In Indian indentureship was on the one side, there were oppression, racism, brutality, but on the other side, it was an opportunity for a lot of people from India for a better life. We have to recognize that. And in the framing, if you use the parallel the association with slavery, because slavery was a bad thing and you celebrate the abolition, but the abolition of indentured labor, especially in Suriname, was regretted by the Hindustani people. They asked for more immigrants to Suriname. There was a delegation that went to India. They talked to Gandhi and the Ali brothers and another guy who wrote a report. And as far as I know, also from Guyana, a delegation, the Nanu Lukku Commission went to India to ask for reopening the immigration. So if you make a proposal containing the whole Indian indentureship groups, you have to reckon with the differences and the varieties in the whole of Indian indentured diaspora. I will give 3 examples. You know, for example, the French, in the French colonies, there was almost a kind of indentureship like slavery. The French has the policy of assimilation, and in the economic field, laissez-faire. You can do everything. And the French people in the French regime had a bad life in the colonies. But in the British colonies, ingraining the British culture was very important. And in some parts of the British colonies, like Fiji and South Africa, the indentured labor was harsh. But in the Caribbean, in Guyana, for example, also, especially in Trinidad, it was less harsher. And the third group is in Suriname, the Dutch policy. The Dutch had a policy, not a policy for assimilation, but a policy for retention of the Indian culture. And the Dutch gave the Surinamese, the Hindustani people, because it was a very sparsely populated country, all the opportunities. So in Suriname, for example, indentured laborship is not designed as something that was very bad. There had been uprisings in Suriname and oppression and racism and aggression against what we call in Suriname Hindustani Indian people, but still they see the indentureship in Suriname as a successful story, and they had an enormous population growth. Maybe a lot of people from the Caribbean don't know this, but in the indentureship period, 3,000 people from the Caribbean, from Jamaica, Trinidad, Guyana, the French colonies moved to Suriname and mixed each other with the Hindustani population because they could acquire land freely in Suriname, 2 to 3 hectares. So what I'm saying is that there must be some kind of a nuance, reckoning with all the variations in the indentured Indian diaspora. And in that sense, the framing of this project that you focus on abolition implies that it was indentured labor was a bad thing. But as I said, indentured labor give us the opportunity to have a better life than in India. So we have to use both sides of this coin to remember the indentureship and maybe the Indian indentured diaspora, and to that, and in this sense, to that extent, I have some remarks, but in the initiative, I second the initiative. So that is in the first hand my remarks on this proposal.
Is that it, Professor?
Yes. Okay. This is my, these are my remarks.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for sharing a different perspective on this. We will take comments and questions from the audience at the end of all the presentations. So I hope you will answer some of those. Thank you very much. So ladies and gentlemen, we want to move on to our third speaker now. And this is Pravesh Sharma from Fiji, who graduated with a law degree from Victoria University of Wellington in New Zealand. Unfortunately, you would not have seen him on the promotional material simply because we did not have his information at that point in time. He was admitted to both the High Court of New Zealand and the High Court of Fiji. He has also practiced as a corporate solicitor and as a prosecutor in Wellington, New Zealand. He could not be with us in person today, so that we will now share with you his pre-recorded presentation. Can we have that, please?
Bula, hello and namaste from the Fiji Islands. I'm Pravesh Sharma and I'm the chairperson of the Fiji Human Rights and Anti-Discrimination Commission. Indentureship stands as a pivotal yet often overlooked chapter in human history. Indentureship resulted in a period of migration that shaped societies and economies across continents. The United Nations, a powerful global body, holds the power to bring forth recognition and remembrance for the victims of indentureship. proposing May 30th is the International Day for the Remembrance of the Victims of Indentureship carries great significance in honoring the struggles and resilience of those who endured this system. Available literature shows that between 1879 and 1916, approximately 60,500 Indian migrant workers were shipped to Fiji from India. The Girmitias were subject to physical, verbal, and emotional violence. Girmitia women were subjected to sexual violence, raped, and molested by their oppressors. Some Girmitias were driven to take their own lives. Girmitias were often coerced or deceived into contracts which they did not fully understand. Girmitias faced harsh conditions, exploitation, and a loss of autonomy. Girmitias were denied of their fundamental rights and freedoms. Girmitias' contributions, however, were foundational to the development of new societies, industries, and cultures. The International Day for the Remembrance of the Victims of Indentureship would serve as a platform for education, reflection, and dialogue. It will prompt nations to confront historical injustices, promote inclusivity, and strive for social justice. Through commemorative events, educational initiatives, and cultural exchanges, this day fosters understanding and solidarity amongst people of different backgrounds, fostering a shared commitment to human rights and dignity. The Fiji Human Rights and Anti-Discrimination Commission welcomes the proposal for the United Nations to recognize May 30th as the International Day for the Remembrance of the Victims of Indentureship. I congratulate the Indian diaspora representatives for taking a lead role in lobbying for recognition of the sacrifices made by the victims of the indenture system at a global platform. We must not forget the pain and suffering of the Girmitias. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mr. Sharma from Fiji, in absentia. Ladies and gentlemen, we want to move on very quickly to our fourth speaker now, and this is Janita Tracy. She is in England. She's a senior product manager and chair of the sizable Race Colleague Network Group at Transport for London. She will tell you what RACE is. It's an acronym. Both roles placing her to be a natural solutionist and strategic thinker. Welcome, Janita.
Thank you, Shalima. I thought I might have to introduce myself, so I think my first slide has got some really cringy images, which you can skip past now. So thank you so gracefully for introducing me, Shalima. So yes, just to hone in on the point of being the chair of the Race Colleague Network Group, it stands for Raising Awareness of Culture and Ethnicity. I represent 2,000 active members within Transport for London. It's a big organisation. We've got 30,000 colleagues who I also represent. So it's a role I've had for a number of years, and it involves internal and public-facing activities, including organising things like Windrush Day, South Asian Heritage Month, East and Southeast Asian Heritage Month, Black History Month, and many more. But all of this ties in nicely with these subjects. And the other thing I just want to quickly mention was that I was a UN Women Delegate for the 68th Annual Commission on the Status of Women. So I've got some insight into how they operate there as well, and the work that we can learn from. To propose, so firstly, my presentation, I want to focus on 3 areas, covering why annual days are significant, illustrate the impact of having annual days, using an example from the UK, and then finally why Indian indentureship merits an awareness movement. So my presentation very much supports the arguments where other speakers have provided the how and what we do in a more practical sense, with petitioning UNESCO and trying to move the UN on this. So in front of you now, awareness to propose that the UN recognise Indian indentureship and its abolition, or the diaspora, debatable there. I'm inclined to agree with Dr. Chan, is being an annual day, we must first recognise what awareness days do and why they're important. So if we think about how awareness shifts ideas, it influences change, it shifts hearts and minds at local levels, then at national levels, and then what does it look like at a global level? It brings visibility and shines a light. It informs on subjects not widely understood or known. It connects and strengthens the sense of belonging and identity. And we can take awareness days such as Black History Month, which is celebrated in Feb in the US and October in the UK. We can take LGBT History Month. We can take International Women's Day, where I've had the pleasure of knowing just how impactful this is globally and within the UN, with the Commission of the Status of Women, where we had a huge gathering of women, allies, nations, organizations, all united in excelling the gender equality and women's empowerment. Now, these unified global campaigns where people share knowledge, experiences, and celebrate their journeys, culture, and progress, people get behind them, people buy into them. And more importantly, people think differently because of them, because they have both that lived experience and then the learned experiences that follow awareness days. And so, I mean, we know people influence social change. So having the awareness days, which changes and informs people, ends up shaping international, regional, national, local societies, policies, programs, research, you name it. It drives changes in government, corporations, institutions, media, and much more. It puts awareness on the agenda. And I recently wrote an article on LinkedIn around Indian indentureship, focusing on Indo-Caribbeans. But I began by stating how Indian diaspora is the largest across the globe, something Shalima actually mentioned earlier, 29 million, I think you mentioned, Shalima, and that indentureship has a huge role to play in this. It is really important to understand why there are Indians across the globe, or people of Indian heritage across the globe. It is also really important to understand the British Empire's role in this. History in all its ugliness and splendor can provide such valuable content and context that it should not be hidden or dismissed. So awareness days may introduce changes, and they do. So, you know, because people question the role of what it is that represents it. So what is the role of the UK monarchy or today's Commonwealth? But that cannot be the excuse for censorship and preservation. So I think there's something quite shameful when South Asian communities do not understand the story of Indian diaspora and of indentureship. Many do not know it's connected to the history of forced labour, the story of slavery, the story of slavery and why Black people are in the West is well understood and widely taught. But the explanations around what happens next and why there are such significant numbers of people, of South Asians across the world, has never fully been examined or explained in that same light. So the awareness is important. It creates knowledge. It allows people to delve deeper. It creates movement or movements. If we think about Black Lives Matter and Me Too, that have been recent movements that have helped people wake up. It's helped them listen, take stock, question, learn. It's helped people think more critically, creates new perspectives and wider knowledge, creates that consciousness. So, absolutely important. And I just wanted to highlight some of the awareness days that we celebrate, or I put together for Transport for London. They're on the right, so that you can see. I would love to add something like this to that list. It is so important. If you move on, please, Shakira, thank you. To the next slide. I just want to illustrate this with a real life example, and that example is South Asian Heritage Month. So it's an organisation I've worked really closely with. It's the fastest growing cultural and heritage platform in the UK. It is fully national, so it's a national awareness day or month, sorry. Local governments, corporate organisations, charities all get involved. It is political, it is commercial. People are embracing South Asian Heritage Month and what it means. And to illustrate how this is happening, although we'll put some numbers behind it, South Asian Heritage Month social media had a reach of 234 million last year. It played a significant role in increasing the usage of the term South Asian since it was launched. Broadcasters including BBC, ITV, Sky Sports, Disney Plus, Apple, Spotify, and so many others curated specific programs for South Asian Heritage Month last year in the UK. This happens between those dates that you see, 18th of July to the 17th of August. We are going to be celebrating the 5th anniversary this year. The theme is Free to Be Me, something I've started working on already. And what I've been doing is I've been supporting this every year in Transport for London. And I've noticed our conversations are getting deeper. We are attracting more stories, more experiences, which people previously didn't think they had a platform for or a space for. So, for example, we've got a large Black Caribbean community in the UK. The South Asian Heritage Organisation and I have both noted a shift in many people acknowledging their South Asian heritage. This includes people of Black heritage who identify as Black, now openly stating with pride that they have South Asian heritage and acknowledging that mixed heritage in their families. It is now okay for them to talk about it. Black and brown communities, which were very divided in their identities before, are now breaking down these barriers and uniting in experiences and communities through South Asian Heritage Month. So there is some way to go, but as more people attend, as more people learn about it, they are leaning into their South Asian heritage. And one thing I do want to actually highlight as well is during I think it was a 2022 theme of Partition 75 and Uganda 50, I particularly saw a shift in knowledge around the empire. And this played out recently with the Queen Elizabeth passing and the new King Charles III being coronated. So SAMA's had a huge impact in or South Asian Heritage Month, sorry, has had a huge impact in the UK, but also it's had a global influence as well. We are seeing an impact in India, in Australia, in New Zealand. Juggernaut, one of the platforms you might be aware of, now use the UK's dates to formally recognise that Heritage Month. And I believe it is also bedding into the US. So this is an example that I have used because I want to just illustrate the major impact it is having in the UK, but also personally, it's had an impact on me because I've been able to organise events, discussions, have my knowledge expanded, dug into my family's past, researched my grandfather's indentureship journey, as well as many other colleagues that I've worked with as well, and helped them unravel their stories. And this also includes intersectional conversations, so looking deeper into through certain lenses, such as the Indian LGBT communities and women's experiences. So communities are being seen for their uniqueness, but also that unity. They are understanding how they came about, what they're about. They feel like they belong, and they can understand and celebrate who they are. So I'm gonna move on to my final slide, and I'll keep it short and brief, I promise. So actually, this is a captive but audience that understands this subject well. So I don't need to go into why we need to do this. But one thing I am going to stress is that indentureship, and Indian indentureship in particular, is not widely known across the globe. It is very the education element is just not there. I mean, just as an example, I was at a family event today where an extended member of my family of South Asian descent asked me what indentured servitude was when I explained I was doing this. No clue at all. So to better understand the story of Indian indentureship, we need to help paint that clearer picture of slavery and indentureship, showing that they are twinned together. Indentureship is the next chapter after slavery. It's been referred to as slavery 2.0. Indentureship is the missing link in the global migration story. And let's not forget, it helps explain for so many diverse cultures and their origin stories, which for many go completely undocumented because not all journeys were recorded and not all records are available. And so it's difficult for everyone to fully trace their identities. So I know that Ashok mentioned the colonies and the British colonies that indentured labourers, you know, he had that map there that he showed us. When people talk about empire, the focus is very much on slavery, which centres around Britain or Europe, Africa and the Caribbean. And the next story we hear, particularly in the UK, is that the empire then abolished slavery. But no one then looks over to South Asia, largely India at the time, and look at what they did next. If we delve in and we see the incredible numbers of all of those directions and all those spots on the map, there's so much there that we can delve into and learn. So yeah, I'm going to end it there. I'm in full support of doing this. As a global force, we need to continue to coordinate, as Ashok very coherently presented, a way where we can lobby together. And yes, we owe it to ourselves, we owe it to our history to do that. And I think we all have a part to play here. Thank you, Shalima.
Yeah, well said, Janita. Thank you very much for putting that into the reason for doing this into perspective and personalizing it, actually. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we want to bring on our fifth presentation now. Ambassador Baswati Mukherjee is from India. She's a former ambassador of India to the Netherlands and consultant on heritage projects for UNESCO. Author of the book entitled The Indentured and Their Root, A Relentless Quest for Identity. So she's unable to be with us because of the time zone issues, and we have pre-recorded her presentation. We'll bring that to you now.
Start?
Yes.
Yes. So let me first begin by saying that I wrote this book on the indentured route precisely because I was disturbed at the fact that being ambassador of India to UNESCO, I saw that UNESCO had developed the slave route, and slavery, fortunately, had been recognized as a crime against humanity, like the Holocaust. But there had not yet been at that time a similar process for recognition of indenture and the cruelties, the terrible violations of human rights to indentured men and women in a way similar to that of the slave route. This became very clear to me when Mauritius, on behalf of the entire African group and supported by the Caribbean, I may add, brought the inscription of Apravasi Ghat to the World Heritage Committee in 2007 so that it would be recognized as the place where the indentured servants, servitude, indentured labor had been brought, some against their wishes, some in a manner which is totally deceitful, telling them that it's a small journey, not knowing that they would never go back to India, and not knowing what were the sacrifices, human rights violations, and pain that awaited them in Mauritius and further in the Caribbean, in Reunion Island, etc. I realized when the representative of ICOMOS questioned that the indentured didn't suffer at all, that the indentured should have been grateful that they were given a way out of poverty for a life of prosperity, that this was like modern immigration. I realized that there is a huge misunderstanding which is being deliberately manipulated to deny the indentured their place in history and their place in the international memory created by UNESCO. When the representative of the African group asked me to explain, I did so for 10 minutes, like I'm doing with you now, and the Apravasi Ghat, after my intervention, was inscribed by acclamation and with no argument. After that, the 22 countries on the route asked me to prepare a kind of charter which would be called the Indentured Labor Route, which I did do at the request of the then Prime Minister of Mauritius, Naveen Ramgoolam. We went as a combined delegation, Mauritius, but with other countries on the route, to UNESCO, to the Executive Board. We presented the International Labor Route as similar to the International Slave Route. This was adopted by the UNESCO Executive Board. The resolution was co-sponsored by India, naturally, because it was from India that the indentured were taken. But I was always conscious, as you rightly pointed out before we began the program, that there is no international day inscribed in the UN calendar by which the world would remember the terrible suffering of India's forgotten children, as I call them in my book, that they were forgotten in their own country of origin, that is India, and that pain and suffering was completely ignored in the countries to which they were taken, because those countries were then under colonial rule. And even today, they struggle for recognition of that pain, of that suffering, and some kind of compensation. That is a very sensitive topic, that there should be compensation given to the victims of slavery and to the victims of indenture. And A plain apology is not good enough. However, in many cases, even an apology has not been given. The British have never apologized for Jallianwala Bagh. The British have never apologized for their colonial excesses, nor have the French, nor have many other countries. Now we come to the whole issue of how should we all get together to get a day specially to remember the victims of indenture, the route, what happened on the journey, how, how they reached their condition, especially that of indentured women, etc. The process is as follows. I would say that India as the country of origin, along with all the countries on the route, so the Caribbean, Africa, and even ex-colonial countries who now feel very repentant about what they did. I know for a fact that the Dutch feel very repentant. I was India's ambassador to Netherlands. The French feel repentant. I don't know about the British, frankly. I've never had any conversation with them about them feeling sorry for what they did to us. But maybe that's because I'm an Indian, I'm prejudiced. But I feel that even the countries that were responsible, if they feel sorry, they should join in drafting a resolution for the UNESCO Executive Board, which they should support and co-sponsor, which would set aside a particular day. For instance, I am going to Mauritius and Reunion on 2nd of June. And the people of Reunion Island have asked me to launch my book on 3rd of June in Reunion, because that is the day apparently that the indentured were brought to Reunion. So that's a specific date. There must be a specific date when the indentured were brought to the Caribbean, or when they were brought, there is a specific date when they were brought to Mauritius. This is something that needs to be worked out between all of us as to which date and which day we should decide upon. Then we should put that in the resolution as an operative paragraph, which would state that such and such countries, etc., call upon the UNESCO Executive Board to recognize such and such day as the International Day to remember the indentured route, the indentured labor, the pain and the agony and the process that went into shifting them out forever and putting them in a situation where, had they not been strong and resilient, had they not clung to their identity, they could have been destroyed forever. Something on those lines should be prepared, should be put to the UNESCO Executive Board. The board would surely adopt it. We've always done that. And then we should have a secretariat for the indentured route. If the secretariat is based in Mauritius, maybe for this one we could base it in the Caribbean, and they would be responsible for building up a database which exists to a certain extent in many of the countries on the route. It could be put together, and we should collaborate actively with UNESCO in bringing out a proper indentured labor route document, like the one which I have on the slave route, which is so beautiful and so touching. And it was brought out by the African group when I was there, and I have it, and I used it to inspire me to write on the indentured route. We should bring out such a document, such a book, which would be available in all the libraries of the world, particularly countries on the route, but also countries who were responsible. And on that basis, truly, the forgotten children of India, who then stayed on and through their resilience and courage built the rainbow nations, including in the Caribbean, would surely find redemption. So that is what I would suggest is the process. I am available for all of you to help in any way, to draft the resolution, to connect you with those who are there. One good way of doing it is to straight away get connected with the regional representatives of UNESCO in your home countries. We have an excellent regional representative in India. He's half French, half Australian, Tim Curtis. He is extremely sensitive on these matters, and I already talked to him about it. He said, "What a great idea! It should be. We should discuss it with the UNESCO Director General, and we should discuss it with the ADG concerned. And I'm sure that we will be able to get it through." So, and I think that you have a representative of the Caribbean as an ADG, if I'm not mistaken, in Paris. But it's just a question of checking and building a kind of network. We weren't so good, those of us from developing countries, in networking earlier. We've become much smarter now in networking. We've learned it the hard way, and we should just network and get this together. And I think, if you permit, I will conclude my thoughts here. Thank you.
Ambassador, I just have one or two questions. Since you have the experience and the skills and have had the success in the proposing to UNESCO on various issues, particularly the one in Mauritius, we can offer our support. Do you think you can take the lead on this proposal?
Yes, we should actually get the Indian government to take it forward. That would not be a problem. We should encourage the Indian government and the India's ambassador to UNESCO, who is actually right now the chairman of the World Heritage Committee, a very, very nice young man. I call him because he's just about 40, Vishal Sharma. He is going to be chairing the World Heritage Committee meeting in July in Delhi. This is the first time India is hosting the World Heritage Committee. And yes, you all of you can count upon me at any time. I would be very happy to work out the process, to help you with the draft resolution, to connect you. You can be sure that I would be there always, because I have a passion for getting this day through. I think it is very unfair that so many years have passed and it hasn't yet happened. So I think it would be a joyful moment when it comes through.
Ambassador, thank you. I know a lot of countries, there would be little disagreements on the date. We have to choose one date, and the date spans from May to June, in which Indians arrived. How do you think we can resolve these disagreements from the various countries of indented destination?
It's a very important point, because for instance, I didn't know until I got my ticket, and the Reunion Island colleagues told me that they want me to launch the book on 3rd June because their ship came on 3rd June. Then the Mauritians told me that they want me back on 8th June because that's when the ship came on 8th June. It's not a problem for me. But if you want to fix a date, then we would have to have a consultative mechanism of give and take.
Yes.
And we would need to fix one date.
Yes.
For me, if you ask me frankly, the indentured were taken first to Apravasi Ghat. From there, they were taken in ships to the Caribbean, and some were taken to Reunion Island. But the first port of call was Apravasi Ghat, which they reached more dead than alive, unfortunately, and many of them had died on the road. So maybe, I don't know, but this is something for the Caribbean colleagues to decide. Maybe the day the first ship came to Apravasi Ghat, whose steps are, dented with the feet of so many indentured who climbed those steps not knowing what lay ahead of them. Maybe that's one way out, one solution. Because when I was an ambassador in Netherlands, I was told by my Dutch Suriname colleagues that they have a different date when their ship, and I have all these little model ships they've given me, the Reunion Island has given me, etc. They have a different date for when their first ship came to, for instance, to Guyana. Same for Suriname. So this is something you need to work out. But if you ask me personally, I would go for the date of the first ship ever. The first ship ever came to Apravasi Ghat, so we can decide on that date. But only if everybody agrees. It should not be a matter of dispute that we should not go to UNESCO divided. We must go to UNESCO united, because otherwise they'll say, look, they can't agree among themselves, and what do they want a day for? So we have to solve this problem. It's an important
Yes.
issue.
Sure. And final question, Ambassador. Some people are of the view that we should not ask for a day in remembrance of the victims of indentureship. Instead, we should ask for a date to remember or commemorate the end of indentureship, which was, I think it's January 1st, 1920. What are your views on this?
Indentureship was stopped by the British because of the challenges of World War I and the fact that German ships were attacking the boats that were taking the indenture to different destinations. Moreover, they then wanted these poor indentured people to join the British Indian Army and fight their dirty colonial war in other places. For me, I would say we should have an indentured day the way you and I are discussing, which is the day when the ship reached different destinations, Caribbean,
Right.
etc., and
Yes.
not the day that indenture was abolished, because after indenture was abolished, it continued in so many different forms that I've written in my book. It was just a farce. It was abolished because of huge pressure brought by Gandhi and Indian National Congress, but it was also abolished because the British found it difficult to send them because there was a world war raging. So it was not because of good intentions on their part, and it was not entirely due to pressure. They wanted these indentured Indians to instead fight their dirty colonial wars. So I would prefer that all of you consider that it is better to commemorate the day that they reached. And one more point I wanted to say, we remember them not with joy. We remember them with sorrow, like slavery. We remember them because they lost their liberty. We remember them because of the pain they suffered. We remember them because they never went back. That is the way we should put it in the resolution. It's not a joyful moment. It's like when we put Robben Island, when Nelson Mandela was incarcerated for 23 years in a cell that was so small for such a tall man that his spine became permanently damaged because he could never sleep straight. I've been to Robben Island and I've seen it for myself. So we have to remember this day with sorrow, not with happiness. We have to remember it to make the world remember it, to make history remember it, so that it's never forgotten. That's the way I would like it to be remembered.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. This is the second time we have you on the program, and we certainly like to have you again. So have a good day and all the best. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Always a pleasure. You can count upon me. Thank you.
Yes, good. Bye-bye.
So an excellent presentation there from the ambassador, Basuti Mukherjee. And I'm seeing some people in the chat. I'm seeing a conversation going on in the chat, but I also saw someone ask for her contact details. Unfortunately, the ambassador is not live with us. And if you would like to get in touch with her, we can certainly pass your information over to her and leave that decision to her. So please just let us know. I want to move on now to our sixth and final speaker, and this is Dr. Chris Rampersad. She's from Trinidad. She is a UNESCO Heritage Facilitator, National Geographic Educator, Independent Educator, journalist, researcher, publisher, producer, Small Island Innovator, and World Pulse Ambassador, and a lot more. Welcome, Dr. Chris.
Hi, thank you. Namaskar to all, and happy Independence to Guyana and all the other memorial moments we are observing today and this week and this month. What a beautiful song we began with, and I want to thank the contributors, Ashok for the research presented so far, Dr. Chuni for recognizing the various permutations of what it means, what a proposal like this would mean across the diaspora, and there's much more which I would point out briefly as we move along. All the reasons and the rationale given for awareness building identified by Tracy, the broken link of that as well, and the missing link in terms of the international discourse on colonialism, which I want to deepen, because when we talk about colonialism and colonization and Indian immigration, we forget the pre-Columbian link that also exists in this dialogue of migration that also impact as much on the West as it does on the East. So I am glad you all dealt with the issue of the many dates or one date and that kind of thing, because that certainly would be one of the issues that would come up. And if I might just by extension, just give some background. I was on the UNESCO Executive Board, in fact, when we piloted through the Indentured Immigration Route Initiative, as well as when we introduced other international days and various other World Heritage and Tangible Cultural Heritage as part of my experience in terms of how the board functions, how it functions at international level, as well as in terms of working with the ground communities to get their act together and get the things involved. So it is in that context, I'm going to make the intervention that I am making, that follows, in terms of that kind of experience and what it takes for a proposal like this. I heard the ambassador talk of the denial of history, and within the international memory, that the absence of the indentureship experience. So how my focus, I want to be how to redress this holistically from our end. There is a big international gap. There are lots of instruments through the UNESCO system. I think we've been mixing up a lot too, in terms of what exists in the UN system as a whole, and then the instruments and the mechanisms through UNESCO. So those are distinctions we need to make, in addition to which UNESCO is a massive bureaucracy, and each of these programs have their own massive bureaucracies within them and procedures and processes. So you see, I think we need to be very cautious about mixing up one for the other, because we'll get our lines all crossed up. All right. So there's a lot of nitty-gritty and I's and dots to cross in this whole process. I should say upfront, I understand and appreciate the rationale from which this is being proposed, a day for a memorial of this mass migration of movement, right, from India and across the world. And as I said, one and previous speakers have identified, we are going to have some contention in terms of what date we identify as this and how that process is settled at the ground before, because when we get to UNESCO, it doesn't want contention at that level. It wants to be able to move forward. Now, of course, what it means to move 197 nations to support a proposal, that's something else we need to consider. And all of the other issues that have surfaced in terms of recognition at national levels and at local levels are going to crop up at the international level as well. So these are things we have to be prepared for, as well as a very, very involved process. You should see the dossiers of documentation on my desk that we have to treat with, but it's not one date that they would fall on the agenda. It's hundreds of other issues they're dealing with. So how would they prioritize us vis-a-vis all the other stuff? Okay, so having said that, right? So I'm looking at how do we deepen this process so that we get maximum benefit in engaging with the international community through the mechanisms that the UN, UNESCO, and its whole system offers. Because I absolutely agree on being the missing link in terms of the history and the story of the memory of the world, which is another program that we can tap into. And we really need to understand how we can leverage all of these to make sure that our story gets told. All right. Right. And as I said too, that I was on the board when and was able, because I was sitting on the executive board, to push the labor experience off and at the forefront and within the ambit of towards being passed unanimously. So we got that on. But what have we done with this? We haven't, I don't think we've done anything. We're a decade later with the Indian Indentured Roots Initiative. All right. we are also not capitalizing on the very many mechanisms UNESCO have for world heritage, for intangible cultural heritage, for diversity of cultural expression. There are about 7, 8, 9 conventions, all dealing with culture and dealing with cultural experiences by which we can get that recognition. And I'm not saying that is a matter of criticism. There's a whole list of reasons that our fault as well as theirs and an international system and the way we function in the international system for that lack, right? And I think that if we get one correct, and that's why I'm saying this in this context, if we can get one correct, we can get all of them correct. So I want to address that issue of addressing the fundamental, structural, and systemized reasons why they are not represented. In fact, the Asia-Pacific region, Africa and Latin America and the Caribbean are less than, I think they're under 30% in terms of any across the board recognition by UN and the UNESCO system. So, and this, if we might put it in the context, I heard we talking in terms of numbers, in terms of the Indian diaspora. So, but the UN, even if it describes the Indian diaspora as the world's largest diaspora, it calculates that diaspora comprises some 20 million people. But that figure accounts largely only direct immigrants from India. When you add the NRIs and that earlier movement of our movement in the colonial period, it moves up another 10 million. But when you add the 1.4+ billion of the Indian population itself, right, the unquantified South Asian diaspora, that people from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan, Maldives, etc., the larger Asian that include Malay, Singapore, Thailand, Timor, Philippines, the Pacific as well, you see the kind of numbers I'm talking about and the potential for network, the potential for impact, and the potential for increasing visibility and support. So why aren't we harnessing all of that? It is more than 500 years since Columbus set sail looking for India in our parts and setting off a trigger of colonization that changed the face of the modern world. And it changed how we look at our perspectives and approaches to defining ourselves as well. So, right, and defining the world we live in. And that, I think that is at the core thing. When we talk about changing perspective, building awareness, we need to get into that fundamental area of how colonization changed the way the world looked at itself. Right? And I'm saying that because whoever mentioned it, at the end of the Second World War, when the United Nations and its mechanisms and its organs and all of that cropped up, it came in within the image of the dominant colonial powers. I mean, that is something that we have to lay flat on the table and recognize. So the mechanisms and the instruments of UNESCO are very much tied into the whole colonial system and the way and the approaches and the perspectives and digging into that, which is what I've had to work through with the communities, for instance, the animosities towards such international institutions and colonization. And then at the top too, the kind of mindset, the neo-colonial conditioning that happens through our education system, through academia, through the media, and through all the cultural forms, how that shape why we are invisible in the international arena and why we are not doing enough to get that and increase that visibility. And as I said, if we can get some of it right in terms of chipping at and breaking up the system and breaking up the mechanisms and getting change and transformation happening at that level, we can more easily dent into all these other things. Having one day to recognize the beginning of indentureship or one to recognize the end and its abolition. There would be no limit. There would be no limit in terms of accessing the very many conventions of UNESCO and there are other programs. There's also, you all had a session a few weeks ago in terms of, for instance, the plants that came and how it changed the biodiversity of the earth. So there are other areas that we can dig into in terms of that visibility thing. So what I want to suggest is that I mean, in terms of, as an example, in terms of one of the lags we're looking at, the whole geopolitical configuration of the UN, for instance, which is which is, and it affects its voting, for instance, right? So it votes in blocks, like the Asia Pacific is divided into 5 regions, and are all colonial blocks. It does not recognize this reality of the diasporas that transcend these blocks, you know? So I think these are some of the fundamental things that we need to address, and our labors and efforts would be more fruitful in the long term, because it takes the same kind of process and the same kind of effort and the same kind of energy and the same kind of resources to do that as it would to do one part of in terms of a recognition of a day, right? So I hope this is something, I'm tabling this as something that maybe we can look at as we move forward, right? And then with such an enormous volume of activities I just mentioned, in terms of if we expand the idea of diaspora, the experience, we've heard so much expertise, the previous ambassador, in terms of what happens within the system at some level. It's not just laying a resolution, you know, in the back, behind the scenes. It's really a lot of negotiations around 197 countries that is happening in terms of getting your stuff at the top of the agenda among 100 and some others. Sometimes it's 400 resolutions that are sitting there or more, you know, and how would that? And so what I am saying is that rather than we, and I then go back to the rationale now, right? Where we understand the hurt. We're saying that, yeah, and I think somebody put that in the question as well, question chat session too as well. Why do we always have to think in terms of when we are talking about recognition, or the Africans have a day, so why don't we have a day? You know, why are we being reactive to the process rather than to be proactive to the process, which is what I'm proposing. I'm trying to force fit ourselves into what UNESCO itself and the UN systems are these are narrow, ill-fitted structures that we should really be trying to chip away at to change. And so I'm suggesting that we change the narrative in terms of how we are presenting, what we are presenting. And that comes through changing the narrative of academia and that ongoing battle that we keep having, you know, us and them, of media, of culture, to impact and change a global agenda. We are just toeing the line of a global agenda. I think we should try to look at ways of impacting proactively, right? So to confront and address and redress the more fundamental issues of representation and visibility in these international systems, by reforming and transforming the system. The previous speaker mentioned that there's going to be the first Indian chair of the World Heritage Committee. Actually, the first head of the World Heritage Committee was an Indian, and he was there for quite a number of terms, I think more than a decade. So we've had people in there, we've had this, but we haven't been utilizing the system. The Caribbean, Latin America, most underrepresented in terms of World Heritage. I heard Ashok mention in terms of getting the privacy. India has some more sites than others, but it is still India in terms of its, when you look vis-a-vis other countries that are smaller, you know, what have you, with less history, still very, very much underrepresented. So it's the Pacific and what have you. So how do we readjust the discussion, the academic agenda, the research agenda, the agenda of civil society, the lobby and advocacy agenda, and the process to pivot out of this reactionary neocolonial mode, responding to a neocolonial agendas of the international community, so that it could have more meaningful impact in the long term. Because what we are looking at, unless we fix that, every different process we want to enter, we're going to have the same challenges, you know? So I'm tabling that for us to think in ways of how we can refocus our attentions and our energies to maximum the value we get from these processes of advocacy and lobby. And I want to commend you all. I mean, this is a fantastic forum. You have a magnificent amount of exchange of ideas, value, work, support, all of that. So you have a foundation. We have a foundation on which to build, and strengthen that in terms of how we make interventions for these fundamental changes that need to happen. And I think earlier speakers had mentioned about thinking about the framework within which we are speaking. And I think that is what I'm giving context to, the framework and how we are framing this as one intervention and how that can be expanded to accommodate this lack and this invisibility. How am I going for time? Is my time up, or because I'm
Actually, yes. I want to thank you very much for your insights. I would like to bring on our members in the audience so that they can pose some questions to you and you can continue to share. Is that okay with you?
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I totally agree with you that whatever we are doing at this point in time must have meaningful impact over the long term. We are not in competition. We are not in competition with anybody. I don't think we need to compete with any other ethnic group. I think we just need to make sure that we have meaningful impact, especially for the generations to come. So thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, I invite you now to raise your electronic hand so that I can call upon you so that you can pose your questions directly to the panel, and so the panel will be able to respond. I want to bring on first Mr. Mohammed Keshavji, Dr. Mohammed Keshavji. He's an international mediation and arbitration expert who was expelled from Uganda in his youth and who now lives in London. Welcome, MK. Can you unmute?
He has to unmute.
Okay.
Oh, now.
Thank you, Shalima. Yes, just to correct it, Shalima, I'm originally South African, lived in Kenya, and oversaw the Ugandan expulsion as a lawyer. So
I'm so
think
sorry.
I do bring
Thank
it
you.
African way. No
You're
problem.
all over the place. Thank you.
Okay, no problem at all. I just wanted to make a few very small comments to say Ashok Ram Saran's beautiful presentation covers a lot, but I think that I agree very much with Dr. Chan, and I think what the ambassador and Dr. Chris Rampasad have said, that we are living on a fault line. And today, I think this is an opportunity for us. If you ask me, what has the indentured laborers given the world? We gave the world the first principle of decolonization, because Mahatma Gandhi used the indentured laborers of South Africa to develop his whole notion of satyagraha and mobilizational politics. Now, how many Africans, how many Fijians, how many people from the Caribbean are aware of that? That his philosophy inspired Kwame Nkrumah, Julius Nyerere, Kenneth Kaunda, Martin Luther King. And I think that this is an opportunity for us to nuance our narrative, to show people in all these countries that we did not come and take somebody's jobs away. Besides contributing to the economies of those countries, in our wombs we carried the seeds of independence that germinated on 7th of June, 1893, when Mahatma Gandhi was thrown off the station in Pietermaritzburg. To me, that is a very powerful narrative. We don't have to worry which ship arrived in which city on which day. I think we need to take the concept of what was in the womb of the indentured laborers, that even Britain today cannot say sorry, but we don't need sorry. Basically, we gave the world the whole notion of emancipation in the 20th century. And that's why I would say a little bit more nuance in the development of our narrative would be very valuable. And I think it would warrant cautious contribution. And I would like to volunteer my input whenever that narrative is being talked of, to give my viewpoints on it from Africa, from South Africa, from Uganda, from the Asian diaspora of Africa. But I fully endorse what has been said today, and an absolutely wonderful occasion for us to get this day in the United Nations calendar. I would also mention in that whole pantheon, Nelson Mandela. Mandela learned the art of mobilizational politics from the Indians of South Africa. I think we need to put that into the narrative so that the broader contribution of the Indians is not seen as money-making, money-grabbing, you took our jobs, look, you are better off. I think we need to put our narrative in its nuanced, thoughtful, post-colonial critique. And that's where I would stop my case. Thank you so much.
Very good. Thank you so much, MK. I want to bring on Dr. Arnold Thomas from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, one of our grandmasters in terms of indentureship history in the Caribbean. Welcome, Dr. Thomas.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And I would like to commend all 6 speakers for their presentations on this program. I must say this is one of the most intellectual programs I think I've listened to, because every one of them was so profound. Beginning, Ashok, who outlined the reasons and the objectives and how we ought to proceed with going to UNESCO for recognition of this day. I don't have much comment to make except to say that I'm picking it up that a lot of people want to divorce themselves from slavery, but we must not forget that indentureship, Indian indentureship, was introduced into the Caribbean and elsewhere as a result of the emancipation of Black slavery. And when the Indians came here in the Caribbean, there was something called apprenticeship, which was the period between the actual emancipation. Well, you know, there was a little period that was given for the Blacks to adjust to their freedom. And apprenticeship, we must not forget, became the template for indentureship. And when the Indians came here, although there were agreements between the Indian government and the colonial governments as to how they would be treated, the conditions in which they lived, when they got here, they found that they were not, those conditions were not adhered to. And the Indians suffered, they suffered all kinds of violence, physical and otherwise. So we must not forget the violence that our people suffered. In the case of St. Vincent in 1880, things went so bad that there was a protest march from the estates to Kingstown. In all, there were, and as a result of that protest, it triggered the end of indentureship in St. Vincent. And as a result of that, this is a lot of history you know right in. In all, there was something like just under 2,500 Indians that came here. But after that march in Kingstown, more than half went back to India. And that made a lot of difference. So St. Vincent was the last country to introduce Black slavery. It was also the first country to end indentureship. And let me just end by commending again all those people who have presented and say, I hope we can see something in writing and move forward from here. Thank you very much.
Excellent, Dr. Thomas, and we hope that you will be one of the writers too. Thank you very much. I'll ask Dr. Roseanne Kanhai now to comment.
Okay, so am I unmuted? Thank you.
You are, yes.
Okay, so we're talking about commemorating indentureship and the abolition of it. And my question would be, or my reflection is, to what extent is indentureship really over? Because I was hearing a situation in Italy right now where there are Bangladeshi workers that are on contracts that seem very similar to indentureship. Only men are allowed for a certain amount of time. They have to stay in certain areas. You know, they're allowed, you know, they have to get passes if they want to go to different places. If they want to move out of the place where they were recruited to, and so on and so on. Okay, so I'm wondering if it is indentureship by another name. And when there was a World Cup going on in Qatar, I think that came up, the kind of human rights violations, kind of similar to indentureship conditions, workers being recruited from, I think they said broadly, South Asia. And I'm wondering if by when this proposal is being put to UNESCO, is there any aspect of the proposal that would then ask, or then that other similar contracts or similar labor contracts should be looked at in terms of how close they are to indentureship? Is that happening?
Okay, Dr. Kanhai, thank you for that question. Bangladesh is a totally different country at this point in time, at this time in history from India. So let's get a response from Dr. Chris Ramprasad. And then we'll take Professor Chuni. I acknowledge you, Sue. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for those contributions and questions. Let me just say categorically, I am not saying that we divorce ourselves from the slave argument and the slave, but what came after. What I'm saying is that we engage with that whole process in a holistic manner, that we dent the system and the structures and inhibit us to enter into the dialogue, enter into the discourse, enter into the mechanisms that they provide. And as a complaint across the board, as I said, when I mentioned in terms of statistically, the invisibility of the Asia Pacific, Latin American, the Caribbean, and African communities in the whole UN and UNESCO system. And this is from working with these communities to access the heritage conventions and etc. So I am not diverse. I'm saying that what we do will in fact impact across the board and we get more friends, right? In addition to which, Asha posed a question in the chat about where do we start? And I see, you see, we throw, Ashok, you already, I think, have you in your slide presentation, I saw that you had some recommendations in terms of what next kind of thing. I think that's a good starting point. We need to look to set up, but I would say a concerted program of intervention that would include what we are discussing there and how we can accommodate this within the broader context. And how I think maybe your draft thing there can start as can be the starting pitch, but of course it would mean expanding in terms of the resources. How do we mobilize the resources, the funding, the process, and being positioned within the system to move things forward. And I forget to mention it. I had it in my presentation. Some of these things it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in a year or two. We are looking sometimes at in terms of a decade or more. So we need to recognize, what are we going to use this time for? Are we just going to sit and wait until it gets through the process? How do we use that to generate, more interest and actually to make the points that we are making here in terms of invisibility? So the mechanism also provides that opportunity. I don't know if I didn't touch on any questions, but you can prompt me and I will respond. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. Professor Chuni.
Yes, I want to make two remarks and two proposals. The first remark is, with all respect to the ambassador, she said that the people never went back or returned, but more than 25% till 1/3 of the indentured laborers returned to India. And most of them settled in these countries because they saw better opportunities. For example, also in Suriname, they get a huge piece of land. So it is not the correct argument. A second point is that, especially the people who represent the New Slavery School, they talk about abolition of the system and they design this indentured labor as slavery, but that is, I think, not correct. I've written about the 10 differences with slavery. It was a transitional period. People get the salary. They were not owned by the planters and so further and further and further. So we have to take that in mind. So that puts out the argument that you use abolition in the proposal. But I think it is better, as Jenny said, that you use in the proposal that you say it is an Indian Indentured Labor and Diaspora Day, because there is a need to explain to the whole world community who are we, this fifth, fourth generation of Indian indentured labor, and we are now in the diaspora, and that to distinguish that with the Indian, the NRIs, or the larger Indian diaspora. Then the point about the date, I suggest that we have, in some countries, like in the Netherlands, you have commemoration and celebration of the end of slavery. We commemorate all the sufferings, the racism, the oppression at 31 of May, and 1 of June, we have the celebration, because in the world Indian arrival, it is implicated. People don't think far enough about this, but when you use the word Indian Arrival Day, you see also in the celebration and the reenacting of the ships coming to the countries and so forth. They celebrate what their forefathers, the strength, the ethos, the cultural heritage, the strong ethnic identity. So you can use this as a compromise to all the countries who have celebrations or remembrance in May, and the other countries, I think 14, who have that in June. So 31 of May and 1 June is the pivot, the pilot point to refer to. And a last point is that I think it is a good proposal to put in the limelight this annual day for remembrance, for commemoration and celebration. So, as I said, it is a coin with two sides. On the one side, you have oppression and racism and so on, but on the other side, we became prosperous. We have a better life in all these countries, and you cannot equalize it with slavery, because Black people had a very bad period, and it is still has its impact on how they function in the social economic field in all these countries, why the Indians prospered. And it has the connection to a certain extent with the difference in both systems. So you have to calculate and put in mind what I'm saying now if you make a proposal. So it is when you use slavery, then a lot of Black people say also in the Netherlands and in Suriname that you are jealous. You as Indian are jealous. You copy us. You want to do the same things. You want excuse. You want this. But you compare two whole different systems of labor. As I said, indentured labor was a transitional period between slavery and free labor. And we have to recognize that if we are proposing things to the United Nations. Okay.
Dr. Chuni, thank you very much. I just want to remind you, though, that there are many Indians, us descendants, who suffer from intergenerational trauma, just as the Blacks do.
I know.
Let's bring...
That is not the same as the sufferings of the slaves.
We are not trying to compare
the slaves were owned their lifelong time, like the whole, and the children also, but Indians were for 10 or 5 or 10 or maybe more years bonded, but after that they were free. So you have to take this in mind if you are comparing these two systems.
Thank you, sir. Let's take a closing comment from Ashok. Can you unmute?
No.
Yeah. Good.
Okay. Thank you, Shalima. Dr. Chuni, I would like to briefly respond to you. Indentureship was not a bed of roses. It was servitude under another name with some small stipend because the slavery was abolished. So they used the same ships, the same mechanism, the same plantation owners. It was a commodity for profit. Of course, we gained because we left poverty in India and famine, and we, by hard work, resilience, thrift, and sheer determination, succeeded. So we are not going to apologize for that. Indian indentureship stands on its own as a unique journey, and we don't want to equate it to slavery or any other form of servitude. It stands on its own as a brutal mechanism, but it survived because of the sheer determination of the people. So for that reason, we need a month-long or a week-long recognition by UNESCO of this particular journey. It's not to be equated with any other. We just don't want to say that it was a bed of roses. It was brutal, and as Shalima said, it stands as something that we should recognize for now and for generations to come. Thank you.
Good, thank you very much. I want to ask Janita for her closing comments. Janita?
Hi. Sorry, so sorry. So I've actually just messaged Dr. Chris Rampersad with my closing comment, which is that if we could just, given what I said about how successful South Asian Heritage Month has been, it has primarily been successful because there has been a whole month dedicated to exploring so many issues, delving in, having organizations like Apple, Disney, whatever, curate month-long programs for us to make sure there is a spotlight and it is not budging for a whole month. So if we can move away from a day, maybe tie that in with something like South Asian Heritage Month, or create another indentureship month-long event, I think it's going to have a greater impact. Personally, I would aim that high and then whittle down to what we can get.
Thank you very much, Anita. We will keep that in mind. And Dr. Rampersad, please make your closing comments.
Okay, I would just be very brief. It's just to say that I think framing is important. So it's not really in contention with any of the ideas that have been thrown out so far. So when I'm talking in the context of terms of framing, how you would frame an initiative like this. And I also gave you in terms of the context of what can be done to make it easier as we move forward, and how we can channel our energies, to look at how we channel our energies, our experience, our expertise to maximize the benefits from this process. Because as I said, if we do it one in this and we don't fix those things, we're going to have to continually be exerting the same kind of efforts and energies, and we would continue to be the missing link. We'll be invisible in the system, because one by one, piecemeal by piecemeal is not the way to address the problem. So.
Okay, thank you very much. So ladies and gentlemen, we've had a lot of food for thought today. And going forward, we need to pull a committee together. We ask you to please submit your names to us in order to be invited to a meeting to be determined at a future date. So please send us via email or WhatsApp a simple message: I would like to be on the committee to determine the what are we here to determine today?
The proposal for the
proposal to the United Nations for Indian heritage, to recognize the Indian indentureship system. Why don't we say Indian indentureship system and its legacies? We will discuss that when we come to the meeting. Again, I'm asking you all to please nominate yourselves to be on the committee, and we will fine tune it and get this thing done. I want to thank all of our speakers for your time, your expertise, and your insights on this particular proposal, and we look forward to fruitful discussions about this going forward. Thank you all as well to members in the audience who would have, who had contributed, and we look forward to your continued contributions. I'll turn you over to Shakira now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Shalama, for being a great moderator as always, and thank you everyone for taking the time to attend today and to participate. And as we said earlier, this public meeting is being hosted by the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center, and you can feel free to contact the ICC to publish your books and your reports. And remember that we are kindly asking for you to give us your suggestions as well as donations, and contact Dr. Kumar Mahabir for details. We want to thank our advisory and planning team led by Dr. Kumar Mahabir, our IT manager, Daryl Gransham, who has been recording the program and will upload it to our website and to YouTube permanently. And to Daryl again for designing the poster, to Ravin Ram Singh for the social media marketing, and to Miriam Mohammed for producing our TikTok videos. Our topic next Sunday will be the very popular continuation of our conversations with elders in the Indian diaspora. So please visit our YouTube channel to see all of our past recordings. I am Shakira Mohammed from Trinidad saying goodbye. May God bless you all. Dhanyavad.
Thank you very much, all of you who have attended and all those who have presented. So we are going to stop the recording in a few minutes. So if you want to say anything off record, you can do so now. But I would like to ask Dr. Chris, how long will this process take to United Nations?
My audio. Yeah, Kumar, it's not a short thing. It's not that you draft a resolution and throw it in there. You need to work it up a pile, you know, having sitting down and defining